The federal government has tabled a bill which moves to toughen bail and sentencing laws. Ottawa calls it sweeping reforms to keep violent and repeat offenders off the streets. Eric Sutton is a criminal lawyer. And thanks so much for joining us tonight, Eric.
My pleasure. Good evening.
So the Canadian Police Association, the associations of police chiefs, they're calling these reforms a critical step forward towards public safety. What do you think?
Well, I think they're misinforming the public. I really don't think that these reforms, if you can call it that, will really diminish criminal activity in Canada. What they will do is make it harder for some people to be released on bail, despite the presumption of innocence and the constitutional protection to reasonable bail. So, but it's not going to make our community safer. There's no data that would support that, from what I know, in my years of experience in any event.
Well, you know what you're mentioning among the changes is that's called the reverse onus bail, right? Where the accused has to prove why they should be released, rather than the prosecutor having to prove why they shouldn't be, which already applies to crimes, from what I understand, such as murder. But it just broadens this more now to cover more crimes. You don't think that this is a good thing, then?
No, the reverse onus provisions, they are not new. They when I started practicing many years ago, they existed for certain types of situations and crimes. Over time, it's just been broadened to include more and more types of crimes. And here is another legislative intervention to increase the gamut of crimes for which the accused will have to, despite the presumption of innocence, have to show cause why he should or she should be released, as opposed to the prosecution having the burden. It will now extend to break-ins, the organized theft of cars with where violence is involved. There are just more crimes that are going to be subject to this reverse onus burden that will be placed on the accused.
Now, you alluded to the issue of not enough data earlier. Well, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association strongly opposed to the changes, saying there isn't enough data to support them. Do you think there is any evidence at all to back up what the government is doing?
Well, I think if there was evidence, they would give it to us. I'm very suspicious of the fact that they haven't. It would be very simple to show that there is a connection to stiffer legislation and a harder test to achieve release on bail and diminish criminal activity. Let's see their evidence. There is none. If there was, they'd be happy to share it with the public, but they don't do that. So this strikes me as a pretty empty political gesture, a hardening up of our legislation, which is really founded on principles that we should cherish as Canadians. The presumption of innocence is highly important, and you only appreciate it if you are faced with an arrest or someone you care about is. Until that point, you probably think it's really a detail. It's not a detail, and it's being whittled away with this type of legislation.
And very quickly, because we're almost out of time now, you know that there's going to be people listening to you right now thinking, of course he doesn't like these laws, he's a criminal lawyer. What do you say to those people?
Well, what I want to say to them is that bail is basically a management of risk. We as Canadians are willing to accept certain risks that certain offenders will be in our communities, living at liberty, as opposed to in jail, waiting to be tried. And that's the risk we take because we value the presumption of innocence, because we don't want to jail someone who at the end of the day languishes in jail and is acquitted. That's not a scenario we want to entertain, and we want to limit that. So we accept a modest risk, and that's part of our democratic, that's one of the fundamental precepts of the democracy we live in, that We don't live in a perfectly safe society. Never, as long as we have these notions of presumption of innocence and the right to bail, we're going to have to accept that there might be events which get headlines where we think, well, we're being too generous, but really we're not. I think we have to just accept that there might be unfortunate events, but for the most part, people respect their bail conditions and are entitled to be at liberty while waiting for trial.
Okay, thank you very much for taking time to speak to us tonight, Eric. Thank you.
My pleasure.